Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm just coming from the pub, so you'll have to forgive me if I seem overly enthusiastic about this book. I think I would have been enthusiastic about it anyway, but I went over to Pub Italia here in Ottawa, which is a phenomenal pub. The food actually sucks. I had their mac and cheese, and it was some of the worst mac and cheese that I've ever ordered at a pub. It was like bland pasta covered in Alfredo sauce with a hint of low-fat mozzarella. So if you can imagine that. So it wasn't very good mac and cheese. But you don't go to Pub Italia for the food anyway. You go there for their beer menu, their beer Bible, as they call it, which has, I think, 200 types of beer. And I had something called Forbidden Fruit, which was quite good. It was like a beer mixed with a fruity, almost berry or fruit punch flavor, which is a little bit odd, but I appreciated it with my sweet tooth tonight. And you also go to Pub Italia for the decor, because it is one of the most breathtaking and bizarre pubs that I have ever seen in my life. Not that I've seen very many pubs, but it's in Ottawa's Little Italy on Preston Street here. And it's like part Irish pub, if you know what that decor usually looks like, and part almost Catholic church inspired. There are murals of nuns and monks drinking alcohol on the walls. There is a mural of the Last Supper containing beautiful women drinking alcohol instead of the 12 disciples and Jesus. There are, almost holy looking artifacts and jeweled crosses throughout. There's twinkle lights strung from the ceiling. It's just one of the most interesting pubs I've ever been in. And when you go to the washroom, Adam and Eve are painted on the door, fig leaf and all. So it's quite a unique place. And so you go there for the decor and for their extensive beer menu, which is why I went tonight. And I took with me Man Should Rejoice by Hugh MacLennan. And this is a critical edition. Now, I talked about this in my Friday reads, which won't go up until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. So I filmed that a couple hours ago, went to the pub, and now I'm back having read a little bit of this. So these are sort of going up in the wrong order. So if you're watching this, pay attention to my Friday reads, because you'll see me talk about this for the first time. So this is one of Hugh MacLennan's unpublished novels, and it actually predates his very first published novel, Barometer Rising, which is about the Halifax explosion. And this is a novel that he wrote, in a very different vein from the introduction to this critical edition. We find out that he was writing in very much the modernist tradition, and some publishers at the time, when he was trying to get it published, described it as a very poor imitation of modernist writers like Hemingway. So I'm already reading this with that lens, so to speak, asking myself, is this anything like a poor imitation of Hemingway? And so far, I don't see that at all. Rather, I see the voice of the Hugh MacLennan that I know and love coming through here. But it's interesting to have the author of this introduction, Colin Hill, talk about Hugh MacLennan trying to write in a modernist style, because Hugh MacLennan is really known for his realist style. He is known for a very nationalist approach to literature, for telling the story of Canada. But here we have him in what is known as one of his international approaches. So our protagonist is actually an American born of a Russian mother and an American father, and he is spending a lot of time in Europe. And from what I read in the introduction, he is going to spend some time in Austria, and the novel largely deals with an Austrian civil war or revolution of sorts that was going on, which is interesting because I've never heard of that. In the larger picture of the 1930s, when we think about that era, Austria is not really a country that you think about, but I guess from Hugh MacLennan's perspective, it was a very important country, a very important political series of events that was happening at that point, leading up to the rise of fascism, which I think is what we're getting here. We're leading up to that rise of fascism. But it's just interesting to see Hugh MacLennan, who in the 5 novels that he published only wrote about Canada, trying to take on an international approach. And it's interesting because one of the editors who rejected this novel, Man Should Rejoice, actually said something along the lines of, I don't know who is talking here. I don't hear the British voice. I don't hear the American voice. I don't know what this voice is, which I guess is part of what made Hugh MacLennan inch closer to not only discovering his Canadian voice, but sort of creating for the genre of Canadian literature that Canadian voice that many people at the time believed was missing. And so the introduction to this book really emphasizes the fact that Hugh MacLennan was one of the landmark authors who created that national Canadian voice in literature. He helped to create Canadian literature, but what could he have been if he had continued on with this international vein, if he had instead continued to go for the British and American publishers and tried to write about Europe and the United States instead of Canada? So it's got a very interesting introduction here that I greatly enjoyed. And I don't think I'm going to talk about the novel itself yet in this first video. I apologize if I'm rambling. As I said, I had some delicious drinks at the pub as I sat down to begin this. But there's one passage here that I really wanted to share, and I'm going to have to see if I can find it, because I realized I didn't have a pen or a pencil in my purse to underline anything. So here it is on the final page of the introduction. This is the passage I was looking for. So the editor writes, with the publication of this current edition of Man Should Rejoice, tangible evidence that MacLennan, unlike his alter ego in Two Solitudes, did not always or ever burn the mistakes. Future readers and critics might now determine for themselves the significance of MacLennan's little-known early experiments and the value of the initial critical statements about his international novels explored above. Regardless of whether or not it haunted MacLennan permanently, Man Should Rejoice tells an enduring story that ought to haunt us today. The novel is a product of an historical moment that is at once fading from collective memory and eerily familiar. The world it depicts is one in which young men and women are coming of age at a time of economic hardship, one that is originating on the promise that future generations will enjoy a better standard of living than its predecessors, one bitterly and increasingly polarized ideologically, one of increasing economic disparity and environmental degradation, one that sees democratic institutions under attack and impulses towards totalitarianism. Pardon me, my pronunciation is suffering here. To be honest, I don't think I've ever said that word aloud. Totalitarianism. You know what I mean. Growing stronger, one in which citizens of the same nation take up arms against one another, and catastrophic global conflict seems a real and near possibility. Readers might still conclude that Man Should Rejoice is a curiosity from a distant time and place that are best forgotten, or they might read it as a reminder that history has a way of repeating itself, and find in its pages spectral likenesses of present-day realities. Or perhaps they might read it as a comforting reassurance that we have been here before and endured. The international novels that MacLennan cast aside to pursue his national thesis, novels about a Canada of the past, perhaps speaks more poignantly than these same novels about a Canada of the present and the future. So I'm quite excited to read more into this novel. Now, I have read about 30 pages or so, but I think I'm going to leave that to another video. I'm just going to leave you with my thoughts on the introduction here. Let's see what else we have here. Is there anything else I'd like to share with you lovely people? Despite its compelling narrative and grave subject matter, Man Should Rejoice is not MacLennan's lost masterpiece. To read it is to witness a remarkably ambitious young talent wrestle with literary form and complex and demanding content. Its descriptive properties bring various locales on both sides of the Atlantic vividly to life. At times, such detail might overwhelm the reader. Its striking characters are lifelike, yet can seem so subversive to the larger ideas and forces that propel them. A contemporary reader will surely detect much awkwardness in the novel's treatment of gender relations and sexuality. Despite these usurping missteps of an inexperienced novelist from a different era, Man Should Rejoice is an important window into the formative development of one of Canada's most significant modern writers. So this will be interesting. One, to learn what MacLennan's writing style was like before he first published Barometer Rising. Two, to learn about his thoughts of the time on politics and international relations. He was often accused of having a too almost non-fiction writing style as opposed to something that flows as fiction. And three, to read something that the editor who wrote this introduction, Colin Hill, believes is almost applicable in terms of its themes to modern day. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now with Man Should Rejoice.